Hey Dad, could you get me one of your homebrew?
Okay, yeah, sure. Which one do you want?
Surprise me.
I've been homebrewing for, well over 20 years. I think I probably started in the early 90s. For me, homebrewing is an opportunity to make really good beer for my friends, to be very creative with things that I can do. It's a science, and so it's a lot of fun to create something very, very good. I've made 4 or 5 different kinds of IPA. I've made Russian Imperial Stout. I've made Scotch Ale. I've made Belgian Brown Ale. I've made Belgian Dark Strong Ale. I've made Trappist Roquefort 10. I've made West Veteran 12. I've made, just all kinds. That's the fun part about brewing. You can make any great beer you want to try and make. The first beer I ever made was a beer from a kit. The kit has all of the stuff in it that you need. The kits have what's called extract in it, which is an extract powders and extract liquid. And what the people that make extracts do is they ferment grains and then extract the moisture and make a powder or a heavy, like molasses kind of liquid. So I have a 30-gallon igloo cooler that we fill with grains. And so instead of buying an extract liquid or an extract powder, we make our own extracts. What you do is you steep the grains at 154 degrees in the mash tun for an hour, and then you siphon it out into a stainless steel pot that you're going to boil it in. And then when you boil it, you put in hops, and you put in Belgian candy sugar, you put in molasses, you put in whatever you need to put in the boil, honey, sometimes you put in honey. And after it's done boiling, we have a copper coil that we sink into it and that'll extract the heat. We run city water through it or well water through it, and it cools down very quickly. And once it gets down to 70 degrees roughly, we put the yeast in it, and then we put a airlock on it to keep out anything that we don't want in there. So that's called primary fermentation when the yeast is active. So when the yeast is done, you transfer it to a secondary fermenter, and there you age it in the secondary fermenter, and all the rest of most of the yeast will precipitate out in the primary. In the secondary, you'll get the rest of the yeast will filter out, and so depending on what the beer is, it'll age in the secondary from 2 weeks to 6 months. So once you're done, once it's aged properly and settled out properly, you transfer it to a bottling bucket, you bottle it, or you put it into a keg. So that's basically the process. When I first started brewing, I tried to make, after my first batch, I tried to make things I liked. I tried to make Bass Ale. I tried to make Guinness. And I tried to make McEwen Scotch Ale. And I failed at Bass Ale, I failed at Guinness, but I beat McEwen Scotch Ale. The beer I made was better than this nationally distributed beer. A couple friends of mine that have had it, they said, boy, could you make a batch of this for me? I've been asked 3 times to make beer for people's weddings. I've currently got a friend of our family's that wants me to make a batch for him. He said he'll pay for the ingredients to make a batch for him. And so that's been my go-to beer. I've made that 3 to 5 times a year for the last 20 years. The best beer I ever made was the Russian Imperial Stout. I've made it a couple times. It's a jet black stout I call Black Sabbath. I wasn't sure how it was going to come out because it was very complicated, and it had a lot of problems in brewing because it was a crazy fermentation. It's got vanilla beans in it and bourbon-soaked oak chips. It's the definition of a sipping beer. And I had it ready, and it was supposed to be in the bottle for a month before you drank it to bottle condition. But it was Super Bowl, and a friend of mine, Steve Rager, came over, who was a home brewer, and I opened a bottle for him to try it. And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, Kevin, please save some of this for next Christmas and the Christmas after that." It's robust and just a tremendous, wonderful flavor. It's a true great accomplishment to make something like that.